I'm gonna go make a mess.
Hello, everyone. We'll let everybody get a chance to join us. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Kate Kite, the Continuing Education Coordinator for Illinois Heartland Library System. And today we have a special meeting for the Automatic Materials Handling System, a live Q&A with Colleen Dettenmeier, the Delivery and Facilities Director here at Illinois Heartland. I'd like to ask everyone to please make sure that you're muted and that your video is off during the presentation. There will be time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat throughout. So if you think of something and you want to put it in the chat, I will be taking notes, but we will be addressing all questions at the end. If you would like us to record your attendance in L2 for this event, please make sure that you rename yourself, either your first and last name or your first name and your library. And without any further hesitation, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kate. Okay, today I thought we would go over a brief summary presentation of the actual automated material handling system proposal that was presented to the board. And then I have some few additional details, and we can cover that today before we jump into the live Q&A. Today, what we'll cover: the background, the current funding challenges, the AMHS acquisition costs, the recommendation that we presented to our board, some details on barcode duplication, and we also conducted an outside barcode survey and those results, and then any submitted questions, and then we'll jump into the live Q&A. All right, as many people are probably familiar with, an automated material handling system is a tool or system of tools that removes the need for manual interaction to check in, check out, move, or sort materials. IHLS staff have been investigating the AMHS benefits since January of 2019. Many of our staff have been involved with the AMH system project, and our delivery and facilities director, which is me, and the sorters, the finance staff, and the share staff, as well as IT. We have also formed an AMH working group, and this is formed with IHLS staff as well as member libraries, and this will help us analyze the costs and benefits. And it's also in more details, like specifically, if we do get this system, they'll be helping us determine the barcode duplication details and how all that would work out and the timeline of things. It's important to us that we identify and address our members' concerns. So that's why we formed the working group. So it wasn't just IHLS staff figuring out all these details. All right, so the materials that are sorted by IHLS Delivery. There are approximately 97% of materials that are sorted by IHLS Delivery that are share member materials. And then the remaining 3% are our standalone member libraries. In delivery, IHLS can use the information from that shared ILS Polaris to automatically sort those materials. And this will happen by when a material is fed through the AMH machine. It will scan that barcode that's on the outside of the materials or the RFID tag, and then it will automatically be sorted into the proper bin. I'm sure many of you have seen the potential benefits for member libraries and for IHLS staff. I will briefly summarize these so it's not a repeat of a lot of what you've already heard, but I wanted to go ahead and review this in case anyone hasn't had a chance to read any of the details. So an AMH would provide many potential benefits to our members. There would be a long-term cost savings for the share member libraries that they would no longer need receipt paper after the machines have been fully implemented. So basically that sticky transit receipt paper, or if you don't use the sticky paper, the regular paper that you tape on, those would no longer be needed if we use the machines. And this would apply to only SHARE members who use the automated Polaris system. Those receipt paper, that functionality would basically just be turned off. And then whenever an item would be getting ready to be checked out, you would just scan that to check it out and place it directly in the tub. You would not need a receipt of any sort on the book, and the books would be sorted, or audiovisual, they would be sorted by the barcodes. We would have a faster turnaround for delivery time after the weekends and holidays. I'm sure as many of you are familiar with, once we have a holiday weekend or a long weekend or a route cancellation, we tend to have a big backup of items that need to be sorted in the delivery hub. And so those would be able to be sorted that same day instead of taking basically the entire week to get caught up. We would also have more accurate sorting. While sorting mistakes are not common every day, it does happen. So when the item is sent to the wrong hub, that could cause multiple day delays as well. So the AMH would further reduce this occurrence. We would also have pandemic resistant sorting. It would be a low touch nature, and it would make disruptions from future pandemics, if those would occur, far less likely. We would also have more accurate data tracking and statistics. This would automatically update the item status in Polaris to let the library know precisely where the item is in their transit journey. And then we also have a potential for branch level sorting for the SHARE member libraries. So this is currently a feature that we're exploring the feasibility on, but we're fairly certain that what we'll end up doing is that for libraries that have branches, we will go ahead and sort those items at the branch level, because you will typically use that transit label currently to be able to sort your materials. So since we would be removing that transit label, we would go ahead and just sort it at the IHLS hub. Of course, their implementation would also bring many benefits to IHLS. The biggest benefit would be that it would reduce our long-term operating costs. The personnel costs would be reduced through a decreased total staff hours needed. So we have a lot of attrition-related staff reductions, and this would be accomplished through this. We would not be planning to lay off any staff. It would just be less hours total needed for our sorting process. So our biggest concern is that we do have a lot of staff turnover. We frequently need to hire new sorters. And for example, we've had to onboard and hire one sorter on average every 2 months over the last year. So that's a big amount of turnover. And we certainly would like to reduce this if that's possible. There'd also be faster turnaround, which is the same benefit I've spoke about previously. We would also have increased efficiency through increased speed, which similar to what I stated previously, less mistakes on the actual items. And then we would have a reduced likelihood of chronic injury. And this actually could also be listed on the member library side as well, because you can spend quite a bit of time looking for a barcode, and that is a repetitive injury. And there can be workers' compensation claims to do with repetitive injury. So we would have the same benefit on the IHLS side, is we would have less likelihood of chronic injury. And then we would also not need any major changes to our current infrastructure. The current AMH machine that we were recommending to our board only requires, oops, I skipped ahead, but that was the last one anyways, that only requires a standard plug and a data cable to make the machine functional. So we would not require any large changes in our building. Okay, how is IHLS funding determined? Funding for IHLS is written in Illinois statute and the Illinois Library System Act. And we are funded through the Library Services and Technology Act and the Illinois General Assembly. So system area per capita is also known as SAPG, and those funds are determined after each 10-year census, with the next review in 2031. This means that IHLS current funding will remain flat until FY 2031. IHLS does not have the ability to tax levy for any additional revenue. Our delivery budget is comprised of about 60% of our SAPG funds. So even with small increases in delivery volume, the cost of providing delivery service will continue to consume a significant portion of our SAPG grant every year. Apart from delivery services, we are also responsible for supporting other services such as membership support, continuing education, and more. By reducing our delivery budget, we aim to allocate more funds to our other priorities. So, how did we determine what delivery volume might look like in the future? We projected that based on the historical data. So, first, we took a look back at the last 12 years of our delivery volume from FY 2013 to FY 2024. And then we removed those COVID-19 pandemic outlier years, which were 2020, 2021. And then we also made the assumption that this year, FY 2024, was also a COVID pandemic outlier year, only because the increase that we've seen is very significant, and that has brought us up to beyond the COVID pandemic levels. So we made the assumption that a 28% jump in items would not be a normal increase, and so we did not want to change the average by including a very large number. So based on those historical analysis, it came out to a 7% growth that we would see each year. We wanted to, though, also develop alternative projections whenever we were looking at this, because we didn't want to make the assumption that it would continue to grow 7% every single year. So we did them at 0%, 3%, 5%, 7%, and 10%. And this was just to kind of determine what our volume might look like in the future, because our sorting budget is determined on the number of items we need to sort. So whether or not it takes 5 days to sort that same set or 1 day to sort that same set, we would need to be able to sort all the items that come through delivery. So our budget would only increase as more items are coming through. So here's a chart that would show what our sorting hours would look like through those next 10 years. I think maybe you can see my mouse. The blue here would be what sorting would look like with the automated material handling system, and the red would be what our sorting budget would be like without the automated material handling system. So as you can see, or orange, I should say, orange will continue to grow. The red will, or the blue will also continue to grow, but at a much lower rate. And our overall budget would be far less if we purchased the machine. So here's the overall savings that we're estimating over the next 10-year period. And this would be with the automated material handling system, the difference of the blue and the orange in the previous chart. And so as you can see, with different delivery volumes, whether or not it's a 0% growth in the number of items we're sorting compared to this year, or a 3, 5, 7, or 10, the projected savings would, of course, continue to increase based on the number of items we would be sorting. Okay, so what are the costs for this system? There would be a one-time purchase of the machine at $725,000, and then there would also be a one-time implementation cost of $127,990. These costs, the one-time purchase of the machine, of course, is just the machine itself. The implementation costs would be mostly the barcode duplication project that we're offering for our members. There are also some we're considering installing a dedicated outlet for the machine so that it's not on the same breaker as the other outlets that we have in the building. But that's what the one-time implementation costs. It's nothing to do with the actual vendor. These are IHLS implementation costs that we would like to do. And then there's also the ongoing annual machine maintenance costs, and those would be paid for by the personnel savings that we would see annually. So here's the projected costs and savings, just a visual demonstration of that. The blue are the expenses that we expect to have. And of course, those remain flat because at any percentage of volume growth, the expense for the machine and the purchase and the maintenance agreements would remain the same. So at any delivery volume, the expense would remain flat, but at various delivery volumes, the expenses would go up further. So the savings would increase as the volume or the percentage growth of items to sort would increase. So here's a chart of the return on investment if we elected to have the vendor purchase maintenance. And as to be expected, as the volume growth increases, the return on investment number of years also decreases. So I believe it was 9.81 years if we elected with the current vendor purchase maintenance contracts. And then if we looked at a normal 7%, it would be right around 8 years that we would expect to see a return on investment. We also looked at what would it look like if we decided to do in-house maintenance instead of electing to purchase the vendor maintenance, and those costs would be drastically lower. So even at a 0% growth in current sorting volumes, we would see the return on investment in a little over 7 years, and at a 7% growth, we would see it at close to 6 years. So what were the responses we received? We received bids from 3 vendors: Linkso Systems, MK Solutions, and Tech Logic. We did split them out by location just because we were curious on what the individual prices would be. And then here shows the total bid prices. And if you are familiar with the sealed bid request for a proposal process, you do need to elect the lowest responsible bidder. So Linkso was the lowest bidder, and that's who we are recommending to our board. IHLS staff recommends awarding Linkso as for the project because they were the lowest responsible bidder, excuse me. And then, as I just said, the RFP process requires us to accept that. We did a little research on who currently has a Linkso system and where are those installed, and then what's their annual volume and their automation platform. So Marigold Library System is probably the most similar to what IHLS would be. They're out of Alberta, Canada, and they estimate to sort around 2 million items a year through their system, and they also have Polaris. We would be sorting a little bit higher volume through our system, but that was good to hear that there's a similar library system that actually also uses Polaris and that is using a system like we would be. Other systems, Clackamas County, which is Link, they're out of Oregon. They sort 1.25 million items and they have Symphony. There's Arapahoe Library District. They're out of Colorado and they sort 4.7 million items annually, and they have Sierra. Whoops, excellent, clicked. There's also Seattle Public. They're out of Washington, and they sort 11.5 million items annually, and they have Horizon. There's also San Francisco Public Library, and they're out of California, and they sort 720,000 items annually, and they have Sierra. And then we chose one of our member libraries. We know there's a couple that have them, but Decatur, they have the Linkso, and they sort around 173,000 items annually, and they also have Polaris. There are some additional add-ons that we might be purchasing. There could be some ergo trolleys. Those are the rolling carts, so that materials could be sorted in there and then rolled away and brought back for the additional configurations. There's also an ergo feeder. This would be an auto feeder for the machine. Staff would still need to place the materials on this feeder, but then they could walk away from the machine as it was being loaded onto the machine to get additional tubs or to straighten things out, and then they could come back. There's also bottom barcode scanners. The current system that they recommended to us only had the top barcode scanner and then the RFID scanning capabilities. But we wanted to go ahead and get the bottom barcode scanner so that we didn't have to worry about where member libraries put their barcode, and then IHLS staff wouldn't have to identify where the barcode would be before placing it on the machine. And then there's also this color graphical system display, and this provides a full visibility of the sorting machine in color. So you could identify where the tubs might be getting full quickly. And then as well, if there's an error anywhere on the machine, you could look at the TV and indicate what the status would or what the errors would be. If the board approves, there would be some staff managed vendor negotiations. We would have a final determination on which additional add-on features we would want at what price. And then there would also be a final determination if we want the vendor purchase maintenance contracts and at what price. As we've stated before, the board would need to make this final approval, and that would be done whether or not they want to approve at the May 2024 board meeting. Okay, so here's some details on the barcode duplication. As every library is familiar with, we conducted that report to see what would be your preferences if we were to get the machine with barcode duplication. So option 1 was to have all IHLS duplicate all the eligible barcodes as they pass through the hub. Option 2 was to borrow a barcode duplicator from IHLS and duplicate the necessary barcodes ourselves, or option 3 would be some of the above. So I believe it was around less than 25% of the members that indicated that they would like to do that themselves. So the remaining of the members would either have IHLS completely do it or willing to help on their with some of that. What would the barcode duplication process look like? So it's a very simplistic process in theory. First, you would find the barcode in the current item. You would scan the barcode with the duplicator, and then the duplicator printer would auto print a copy of that same barcode. And then you would take the barcode off the label off of that printed item, and you would apply it to the new barcode. So IHLS staff have tested this duplication process on a loaner machine that we've received, and we've even tried to destroy some of the barcodes just to see what it would do if they could be destroyed and would they still be scannable by the duplication machine and by Polaris. And the process is working as planned. We took our nails and scratched it really hard. We took some keys and scratched it really hard. The keys actually did end up scratching the barcode itself a little bit, but then we tested it with the duplicator and it did duplicate the barcode, no problem. And then that same scratched up barcode was actually able to be scanned in Polaris and readable as well. So that was good to hear. We have been talking internally about this whole barcode duplication process, and we're considering that we may need to extend the timeline of what we're thinking as far as for the implementations of the machine. So we may be thinking about postponing that until spring of 2025 for the first machine. That's yet to be determined, and obviously it depends on whether or not we're even getting the machines. But that's something we're considering since many members have spoke up about that and don't think they would have enough time to complete that if they wanted to do it on their own. So how would that process look like if we did it at the IHLS hubs? Materials would be sent through delivery like normal. And keeping in mind currently now we would have the transit labels and you would continue to have those transit labels. And as items would then be sorted through the machine, they would they would go to an exceptions bin because they wouldn't be able to be read. And then we would take that exceptions bin and we would determine whether or not it's a member that wants us to do it for them or if it's a member that needs to do it themselves. So if it's a member that wants us to do that duplication for them, we would go ahead and do that duplication and then we would sort the material. And if it's a member library that doesn't want us to do it for them, we would still hand sort those materials like normal then. We would also need to complete an intergovernmental agreement for each library before we would do that barcode duplication process. And this would only need to be for the ones that would be doing the duplication at the IHLS level. Member libraries who would be borrowing the machines would just be borrowing the machines. They would not need an IGA. So here's a sample of what those barcodes looked like. They provided to us a standard size label. We are actually considering doing a smaller label to take up a smaller footprint on the item. So the Polaris item record would not be changed. The library name or current spacing convention would not be applied to the outside barcode. And the barcode would be placed on the front of the item. Whoops, keep clicking, sorry guys. On the top left corner horizontally. And we are hoping to use a smaller barcode than what's visible here on the screen. Oh, and I didn't say that. The current barcode would be duplicated and both barcodes would still work on the materials. So you could keep the inside barcode and that would still be usable in Polaris and with your staff if necessary. Okay, so barcode duplication at the library level. Barcode duplicators could be loaned to our members. Each library can determine how they would like to complete the process. And IHLS would provide basically what we're thinking is like a tub, a kit of the duplicator system, the barcodes necessary, and then instructions on how to, change the barcode labels, change the printer resin ribbon, standard instructions with that kind of information. And then we would determine a standard loan period. And then we're hoping to use Polaris to use that as a check-in, check-out functionality. And we're meeting later to determine that. Okay, so following that survey for barcode duplication preferences, we received feedback from member libraries about how would that process occur. So we went ahead and conducted a second survey for the libraries that currently already have outside barcodes to gather additional information from them. So the first question was, how long have you had outside barcodes? As you can see here, a large percentage have either had them 20 plus years or 10 to 19 years. There were still a considerable amount that also had them less than 10 years. And do you apply protective cover to the outside barcode? I know this was a question that we received a lot of feedback on, and whether or not it was necessary or not to apply those protective barcodes on the outside. A larger percentage did say yes, and a smaller percentage said no. And then we asked them if they did use protective cover, what type and what specific products did they use? It looks like the large majority would say book tape or label protectors. Some people even said they used Scotch tape. There were other people that said laminate book wrap, some with book tape, some with label protectors, and then some people used book covers completely. For the libraries that said no, that they do not apply protective cover over the barcodes, we asked them if they had noticed issues with not having protection over them. Did they have scanner readability issues? Did they have to replace them frequently? A large percentage said no, and then a very small said very rarely. And in that very rarely, it was like maybe once or twice a year, or maybe once a quarter. It was a small percentage of barcodes that would need to be replaced or not function. So then we said, and this was asked to everyone, how frequently have you needed to replace an outside barcode due to its inability to scan in Polaris? Few times a year, very rarely, never, and then not applicable. There were some people who had answered the survey, but they actually had RFID, so they don't deal with the barcodes on the outside. I'll just leave this up here on the screen so some people can read. Are there any negatives to outside barcodes? I'll just read them. It'll be a lot easier in case anybody doesn't have their screen up. Depending on your placement, you may cover up important info. I've had a few times I've had to replace from a child tearing one off. It can discourage our staff member from remembering to check the discs that are present. And sometimes it covers up an important part of the title. Maybe 2 to 3 times a year, I've had a kid who has peeled them off. No, other than new textured covers. No, we do actually open up every DVD case to make sure the DVDs are inside, though. Occasionally, you may feel bad about covering up the part of an author or title, but I see no negatives. Only that it obscures text print on book jackets, and if poorly placed, it could cover the ISBN. And sometimes kids pick them off entirely. Whoops, and I see there's one more down here that you probably can't read. The only drawback we've encountered would be some occasionally falling off. Are there any positives to outside barcodes? Yes, it makes inventory much quicker and it's easier to scan and find the barcode. Those were the two main positives that everybody had said. And then we asked if they could provide any tips or details, if they had newly changed their barcodes or for member libraries that would have to follow this process. This was the details that they provided. I think they will like the outside barcodes once they get used to the change. If I had to move barcodes, I would change them as items circulated. We just started putting them all on the outside. It's a relatively the same place. Our previous books are a mixture of inside and outside. We only have put it on new material and we have not done the older items. We started doing it this way when and I believe this is the Shawnee library system upgraded to the Dynex system. Our old barcodes were no longer usable, and we received a large box with the smart barcodes in order by collection. The barcodes had the titles printed on them and the call number and the collection information above the new barcode. It took us about a month to get the most of the barcodes put in place, and it was much like doing inventory. We're a small library with 6 part-time staff. We did the change in barcodes by hand as we had time. And then this last one said, when we joined SHARE, we made the change. And there were a couple of them that had reported that. Okay, so we only received one submitted question ahead of time. And so that question was, barcodes are not free. Who will help with the cost of adding barcodes to the tens of thousands of books we have in our library? Also, the time needed to add barcodes to any books that could potentially take years. How will that delay be addressed? I think we've answered some of this throughout today. Of course, we know barcodes are not free. and IHLS is willing to help with the cost of adding these barcodes to the materials as they circulate through delivery. The big thing here is that the purpose of this project is for IHLS to be able to sort the materials through delivery. So we are not asking for every single item in your library to be changed. Of course, I know a lot of member libraries would prefer to do that. And if they want to borrow the barcode duplicator after this and do that process, or if they want to do it during that, that's up to your discretion. But we're only asking for the barcodes to be put on the outside for the materials that go through delivery. I believe it was a little bit over 8 million items that are actually in the share collection. And then we ran a report through last calendar year, 2023, to see how many items have actually circulated outside of the libraries. And I believe it was a little bit under 800,000 items. So it was around like 797,000 items that circulated outside of the libraries themselves. So as you can tell there by those numbers, 700 or 800,000 of the roughly 8 million items, that'd be a little bit less than 1% of items that would, or I'm sorry, that'd be 10% of the items that would go outside of the libraries. As well as the time needed to add the barcodes. So since IHLS is willing to do a large percentage of these for the libraries, we are planning on having contractual staff that would help us do this barcode duplication process. And we are hoping to have a large portion of that done before we would implement the machines. We are planning on hopefully delaying this timeline a little bit further so that the libraries that want to do it themselves will have ample time to get that process completed. But again, we're not expecting you to do your entire collection. It would be only the materials that would be going outside of your library. Okay, well now I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to the live Q&A. Kate, do you want to help me with which questions are out there in the chat?
Oh, yes, definitely. I received a question. We're going to address them in order. And I received a question asking about receipt paper, because at the libraries, receipt paper is used by staff to know what to do with materials such as holds that are going on the shelves for patrons. How would we handle those items if there's no receipt paper?
Oh, I wasn't clear on that. At the library level, you still would have receipt paper for what you're using your purpose for. It would only be transit labels that we would turn off the functionality on. So that would just be whenever you go to check that out for it to be a transit on hold or you're returning it back, those receipts would be turned off. You would still have receipts for when you're checking it back in for whether or not it's a hold or to be reshelved.
Can you expand on the memo to IHLS board regarding in-house maintenance? Are there current in-house maintenance staff at IHLS who could handle this machinery?
There are not current in-house maintenance staff. So what we were considering is that we would possibly add that to someone's job description in the current staff. We are not planning on creating we wouldn't add an additional staff member. We would be considering it would be a current job duty for a current staff member.
Okay, hold on just a second, Colleen.
Sure.
So that was my question. And so what you said seems kind of odd because what I'm interpreting what you said to mean, let's say I worked at IHLS, so I could potentially become the maintenance person who works on the machinery, which clearly is not possible because I do not have a background in any type of maintenance. So I guess what I'm kind of wondering is when I was looking at this memo, your projected lifetime outsourced maintenance cost, if you averaged them out yearly, were approximately $51,000.
Correct. Yep.
So I was like, just kind of questioning, maybe there is a former technician of machinery on staff at IHLS at the 3 locations. That could possibly be. But if you're not, then I'm almost wondering if it's just a smarter decision to use the outsource, because by the time you hire somebody full time and pay them benefits, you're probably well exceeding that 51,000.
Right. So there is a staff member who is actually really well versed in a lot of maintenance. I'm not saying he's an expert by any means in specific Linkso machines. He's never worked on one, but he is good at figuring things out and troubleshooting and problem solving. And with the actual in-house maintenance, we would be considering we'd probably wait to have the machines a few years and then go from there and determine, is this something that we could conduct in-house. Based on the feedback that we've received from a lot of current Linkso users, luckily those machines don't break down a lot. They don't have a lot of major issues. So it's either something to do with IT, which an IT staff member would hopefully be able to help us with, or it's something to do with an actual part that needs to be replaced. So the current staff member that we're thinking about is mechanically inclined, does understand how to work on machines. And so that's what we were considering. Now, we weren't expecting this to be a full-time job of theirs all the time, because essentially, if the machines are working how they're supposed to, the machines are working until they're not. And so we thought it might be helpful that it would be one person that would be able to go between the 3 hubs, plan their maintenance, do the maintenance on the machines, and then also if an issue were to occur, they could be on the road if it was at a different hub and fix those machines there, because the Linkso does provide spare parts for their machines. So that's kind of what we were considering. It would be kind of a change in their current job duties and a restructure and maybe what their current roles were, but we're not planning on hiring an additional staff member to do that. Did I answer everything there?
Yeah, no, that
Okay.
definitely clarifies it, because yeah, thanks.
I see Sandy raised her hand. Was that, Sandy, was that about this question?
No, it's a little bit
Okay.
about the in-transit slips, because like we have story time kits that are rather large bags
Mhm.
that I would feel that they shouldn't be on that conveyor belt because of the,
Right.
so how would that work?
That's a good question. We'll have to add that to our list of questions, because we would not be sorting large materials through the machine. You're right. There would be an exception. So what we'd probably just do is, my assumption is we would just do like we would do with the manual sort items. We're going to have like these handheld scanners, and we would handheld scan it, and then we would place it on whichever library's tote it would, on top of the tote like we would typically now. So we would just kind of hand sort those materials, which we are considering, and I didn't include in that, if it would be historical or a fragile, and not to be confused with CMC, none of the CMC stuff would go through the machine at all. But if it's something that we're worried about breaking, we would probably hand sort all those, any heavy books, stuff like that, just because we don't want to risk damaging something with those.
Okay, good. And my question about the maintenance is this.
Sure.
I mean, I know you guys we're still in that process of getting approval by the board and moving forward, but once you've been talking with these companies, have you thought of negotiations with a multiple year contract to cost save, and are they willing to offer you some 1 or 2 years of free maintenance service?
Yeah, we haven't got to the negotiation stage yet, but that was also kind of one of my hopes in putting this in the memo, because I'm sure the vendors are reading this document, that since we're determining it would be cheaper in-house, maybe they'd be willing to negotiate with us to lower their prices as well. So
Okay.
that is certainly something we're going to be doing if this is approved, when we go back to that negotiation stage. I do believe that they would probably be willing to negotiate with us.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a lot of questions in the chat. So if you do have a question that you feel better asking in person, if you can let me know or put it in the chat, I will get to that, because we've had a lot of questions come in and I want to make sure we can get to as many as possible. So there are some questions about the barcodes themselves. Do we know if the ink if it's a thermal printed barcode? Who is the company? Just some kind of information about the barcodes.
Yeah, let me look up. We've been talking with Bayscan, and I believe it's not thermal printed. And is Jennifer or Dina here by chance today? They've been the ones helping me communicate the details on that. Let me try to search my email real quick from Dave, and he could tell me exactly the details on that. Because it's a resin label. So the way he described it is that it's actually embedded inside the barcode, and those barcodes are permanent barcodes. So we wouldn't be having that same issue that some people reference, that barcodes would be falling off or being able to be peeled off by a kid. We wouldn't have that issue. It would be there permanently, and it would be embedded inside the actual label itself. So he gave an example of someone set it in the sun in the backseat of their car for over a week, and it did not fade at all. The barcode was still there and full visible, and nothing had been damaged with it at all. So we hopefully will not have that kind of issue with these barcodes.
Colleen, this is Jennifer. I am here today.
Oh, great. Yes.
I just had to look it up. So it is thermal, but
Oh.
it's not like your receipt paper thermal. It is much more durable. And if people are interested, I can actually drop the spec sheets that I just found from Basecamp in the chat so that they can read more about the process.
That would be great. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
And I did want to mention the machine that we received from them was a loaner machine, and it's an older model. We're actually considering going with, if anyone goes to the Basecamp website and looks up duplicators, there's a wireless one, and that's the one we're hoping to go with, just so that you don't have extra cords that you would have to be dealing with. And even on the IHLS side, we're almost thinking of setting it up kind of like a conveyor belt, essentially, where you'd put out like 6 or 7 or 8 books and you lay them all out flat. You'd scan, and then it would print those, and then you would close them up and then apply them in the same order. So we're hoping to kind of reduce as much of the cords as possible. And then we did receive feedback from one member library who saw us at Reaching Forward South when we were demonstrating those. And they had suggested maybe it would be helpful to have power banks so that you didn't have to worry about the cord to plug them in. So I think it just kind of depends on how those costs come back. But that's definitely something we should consider, because then you could actually just take it on a book cart, go to your stacks, and you don't have to be tied to a plug along the wall.
Okay. Were the add-ons that you mentioned, were they included in the presentation to the board?
Correct. The add-ons were. And so let me go back to that slide real quick, because that's something hard to explain. The total price when they did the bids was, I believe it was like 600, and let me get there. Oh boy, it's further back than I remember. There it is, 662,000. So that was the base price of the machine. And so we are asking the IHLS board to approve up to 725,000 so that we can determine which specific add-ons are necessary. Yeah, there's 725,000. So then we can determine which add-ons are necessary, and then it doesn't have to be something that the board approves every specific add-on. So that's how we're trying to do that.
Okay. There's a question about, you mentioned a standard loan period, I believe, in talking about the barcode duplicator. Is that referring to the duplicator or a standard loan period for items? Is
That
the
would
system planning on making that a permanent change to a standard loan period?
Oh gosh, no, not at all. We are not touching standard loan periods. Sorry, I should have been clear about that too. We're not talking about standard loan period for items at all. We're only talking about for when we would check out those duplicators, we would determine a standard loan period for them. That's not a topic we've discussed yet with the working group. Me personally, I'm thinking like maybe you set it to like 30 days or 60 days or something like that, just so that the purpose for this loan period is just so that the next library who's in line has an idea, because the libraries are going to have to be able to plan, when am I getting my duplicator? When can I arrange my volunteer or my staff to be able to help me do this? So we want them to be aware of when they might be able to get that machine so they can plan accordingly. And we don't want one library to just not return it and they're still working on their stuff, and then everyone else behind them is set back on their process as well. So what we're kind of thinking is it's just like an item in Polaris where you reserve it, it's checked out to you, you have it for your period. If you don't get everything done that you wanted to get done, it's reserved again, and you're back in line. So unfortunately, it's not going to be, but we won't make it a short period. We won't make it where like there's no way you could get your stuff done. And yet again, IHLS is willing to do it for you. But if you don't want IHLS to do it, and you want to do it yourselves, then you can borrow the duplicators then. Did that answer that?
I believe so. If
Okay.
not, please let me know. And we had a number of questions. I'm going to try to combine them, basically about the scanner reading barcodes.
Mhm.
So the barcodes can go anywhere on the item for the machine to read it, correct?
Anywhere on the outside,
And
correct.
so if they are reading anywhere on the item, what's the error rate of, like, does it pick up an ISBN instead of a barcode? Is there what if it's got an older barcode? Will it accidentally read that by mistake? Can you address some of those concerns?
Good question there. Anything that's read through Polaris will be able to be read through the machine, because essentially how that machine knows where to sort to is it connects to Polaris itself. So if it's being able to be read by Polaris, then it will be able to be read by the machine. It will not read ISBNs. We made sure of that because that would be a huge issue if it did want to read ISBNs. I think that we want to avoid covering up that ISBN though in general. That's not something we've discussed either yet, but the machine would not read that. And then if it had 2 barcodes, I would assume that if you have an older barcode, that older barcode would not be tied to the item's record in Polaris. So therefore it wouldn't be readable anymore. I don't know for sure how that works though.
Okay, excellent. We've got a lot coming in. I'm going to try to address some of the more general ones just to everybody. If you have specific questions about your library, we may need you to reach out after this presentation, but I'm going to try to get to all I can. So would in-house repairs void any warranty if we had in-house repairs? Is that any issue with that?
Good question. We haven't asked that specifically. The warranty itself is actually only for 1 year on the parts, and I need to read the additional details on that, but that's a great question. So I'll make sure I write that down and we'll ask them that specifically before we move forward with anything.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. Which IHLS staff are managing the negotiations?
It would mostly be the leadership team, and perhaps Leslie, myself, and Troy specifically, but we would have the entire leadership team involved in those negotiations.
Would the implementation plan add the machines to all 3 hubs at the same time, or will they be staggered?
They would be staggered. So our plan is to start with Edwardsville first, because that is the hub that is experiencing the largest issues with sorting and getting everything finished every day. And it's also the hub that I work out of. So I'd like to be there and hands-on and involved working through how this system would work. And then once we get Edwardsville functional, and I guess that would probably be about a month, we're hoping, up to date and seeing whether those number of bins would work and how that would how everything would flow. We're going to go ahead and order for Champaign, and Champaign would be the next hub installed. And the machines themselves can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to arrive after they've been ordered, because each machine is custom made. So if we don't start until spring of 2025, then that means that this would go on into the FY 2026 budget period. And our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30. So I would mean like it would go from July 1 to June 30, 2026. And then Carbondale would be last. So we would do the hubs staggered and making sure that each hub has the proper number of bins, it's working functional, and we're working out any kinks, and then we would do Carbondale. So, yep, that's our plan.
Okay. And just to confirm, that items that are not in Polaris for what, if they're from Carly or Rails Library or OCLC, anything that does not have a Polaris barcode will need to be hand sorted at the system still.
Correct. We would still be hand sorting. Paper labels would still be required for all of those materials. This would only be for SHARE members who have that, for the SHARE system, I should say, that have that automated printed transit label currently. Anyone who's doing anything paper, the ILDS, OCLC, standalone, the ALA form, all of those would continue to be hand sorted as they are currently.
Okay. And so do you know, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but has Rails ever looked at an automatic material handling system? And can you address why they might not have thought that was a good option for them and how that would impact if there is future consolidation?
Absolutely. I'm not aware of any future consolidation, but that doesn't mean it can ever happen. I did speak with Mark, who's the delivery and facilities director there at Rails, about this process, because they did, in fact, actually use the same consultant as us, and they did go through, I believe they went ahead and jumped right into the RFP process. I'll have to confirm that. But what they ultimately decided at the end is it would not work for them. We are in a very unique position, having 97% of the materials that we sort out of one consortia. So that's why it would work for IHLS. I believe and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have 6 consortias out of Rails. So that would mean, and I don't want to jump too much into the logistics of how the machine would work, but basically as items are sorted, we sort them and they go, it would be like the heaviest volume libraries would be sorted first, and then there would be these bins for the next configuration. So there'd be configuration 2, configuration 3, configuration 4, and you just continue to sort based on the heaviest volume, the next set of volume of libraries. So, and that would be done by the consortia. So Rails would have to do that for the first consortia, do the configurations, and then do the next consortia and then do their configurations. So they would end up touching materials at least 6 times to be able to have them sorted, whereas we would only be touching materials twice to have them sorted, and some of them only being once. So if you're a heavy volume library, that's being eliminated on the first set of items, and then it's only being touched once to sort, whereas currently we're touching items twice to sort. So I think I answered all that with Rails. That's why they did not go forward with it.
Okay. Let's see. What is the lifetime of the AMHS compared to the ROI estimate of 7-8 years pending growth according to the memo?
Sure. So of course, there's a standard that they list on the quote, and that's 10 years. I can say confidently, though, that from the machine users that we've reached out to, some machine users have had them 10 years, 15 years. There's even one that's nearing a 20-year mark, and they have not yet replaced their machine. So just like anything, it probably depends on how well it's maintained, how everything's working correctly. But for accounting, depreciation number of years, that is 10 years is what they stayed on there.
Okay. And the board votes on the AMHS May 28th, correct?
Correct. Tuesday, May 28th. Yep.
And is there a cost what is the cost for IHLS to change the barcodes for libraries?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I think we budgeted around 50,000 maybe in contractual staff. I'll make sure I entered the link for where our budget and narrative is. And if anyone in IHLS staff handy has that link, I know in the narrative, we did kind of break it down a little bit on that first general fund page, what the specifics were. But basically what we did was and that's why we took that initial survey, was to get an idea of who wants us to do it and who wants to do it themselves. So within, we took those results, anyone that said either both or IHLS does it, we went ahead and anticipated we'd be duplicating the number of barcodes that they circulated outside of their library over last year. So that's kind of our plan. And that's how we came to those numbers. We estimated that it would be I think we estimated 120 items per hour, which is a very conservative estimation. We're thinking it might be closer to about 300 items an hour that we can duplicate. And so then we'll go from there, and we have that in our budget for the items to be duplicated. But not all of that 127,000 is the barcode duplication process. That's just a portion of that.
Okay, and I want to thank Rhonda Jonassy for putting in the link to the IHLS Open Town Hall where feedback is requested on the fiscal year 2025 Illinois Heartland Library System operational plan and budget. And I think if anyone feels that I did not answer their question, please let me know. There were some more specific ones about sorting that I did not ask.
Hey, Kate,
So
Jill.
Yeah, Jill.
Can I ask a quick question? And I'm actually not necessarily looking for you to answer this. Hold on a second. I'm gonna shut the window. Okay, so here's my question. So this all happens, let's just say, and I don't have a barcode duplicator because it's elsewhere, right? And I haven't sent all my items into you. So I'm sending a book out, because somebody has a hold on it. How am I going to duplicate that barcode in that moment if I don't have that tool? So if you could send out some kind of guide, so whether that's using a Dymo printer or some other way, because I can see this happening over and over to a lot of libraries, because they just haven't gotten everything done.
Right.
But there's an item that needs to go out. So how are we going to handle that in that moment? But like I said, doesn't need answered right now. Just something to think about.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking just big picture, we'd probably just have to continue hand sorting until all of the libraries are on, until all of the materials are on the outside. So what we'd probably do is we'd start implementing the machines, send anything with a barcode through the machine, and then anything that's left in that exceptions bin, we would just have to hand sort until we get to the point where we've got the outside barcodes completely. But we should start thinking about how would that process work for the libraries that want to do it themselves. And almost I'm starting to wonder in my head, do some of them just need their own duplicator for a long period of time? Because that might be what it needs to be. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that with the working group to get more exact details on that. Thanks for bringing that up though, Jill.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We've got about 5 minutes left, Colleen.
Okay.
And let's see, we did have a question about one more question about barcodes that came in, is that can you remove the current barcode from its location inside of a book and place it on the outside of a book for the or instead of duplicating?
For the purposes of the machine, that would work. I don't know about what other libraries might feel about cutting it out of the interior and all that done. Esther, okay, good. You've done that, Mount Vernon. I'm not super familiar with that process of cutting it out, but as long as the barcode's scannable in Polaris, it would be scannable through the machine. So from our side, it would function fine. And I guess you could apply some type of label protector over top of that just so it would stay on, because how well would that barcode actually adhere to the material?
Okay, excellent. And people will still be able to test the barcode duplicator, correct?
Absolutely. We actually haven't even, after that last Members Matter special meeting we had about delivery issues and solutions, I had asked there a couple libraries to say, would you like to help us test this process? And I do have the emails from those libraries who are willing to help. I didn't want to start it until we knew for sure whether or not we were getting it, because I didn't want to cause any confusion until we knew a yes or no firm on the board. So once we have that answer in May, we are going to go ahead and start testing some, and we'll be selecting the libraries that emailed us right away. We have quite a few actually on the list. We probably won't even get to everyone, but I think it's helpful to have some libraries test it and give us feedback, because we're not on your end trying to do it, and we don't know without your feedback. So, yep.
Okay, we have one more question. So let me go back. So we do have, we currently use the transit slips to sort items into hub specific tubs and to sort out delivery on the go books. Will we just be putting everything in the same bins? Because that might be extra work to sort outgoing items without the transit slips.
A member library brought up that question at Reaching Forward South about the delivery on the go, and I have that added to my list for the working group to discuss as well. I was thinking someone there that day had brought up that once you scan an item, it pops up on your screen, and I'm yet again not familiar with the member library side. Is it easily visible to see that library name on your screen to be able to determine, is that a delivery on the go or not? Because we're hoping to continue to use the delivery on the go service. But as far as by actual hubs, you don't necessarily need to, and are they referring to an IHLS hub or their individual branches, maybe is what they were meaning?
I am not. Okay, yes. To follow up, yes, you can see it, but our bins aren't anywhere near the circ desk.
Oh, so you would need to know, because you do it there, and then you would need to be able to make piles to say, okay, this is going to IHLS. These are delivery on the goes. Okay, that's definitely something I'm going to write that down that we need to discuss in detail. I did add that on my list from the Reaching Forward South.
Well, thank you, Colleen. Let's see. Okay, there's one more. This is one question just came in to me, and I am going to read that. And then I think that's about all the time we have. That if the AMHS reads the new barcode and we have to duplicate all of our barcodes, won't it still read our existing barcodes that are affixed to the exterior of a book? Now, but you would not need to duplicate your barcode if it was already on the
Yes.
exterior of your book, correct?
Correct. Yes. I'm glad that person asked that. Just to be clear, it's only libraries that have barcodes on the inside already. They do not have external at all, and they do not have RFID. Those are the libraries that would need to duplicate their barcodes. Any library that has external barcodes currently, or if they have RFID, the machine will be able to read them just as they are. It's not like a new style of barcodes that needs to be used. If it's external already and it's scannable in Polaris, then you don't need to change anything at all. It's only the libraries with inside barcodes.
Thank you so much, Colleen. It's 10:59. I hope that the questions were coming in fast and furious. I love all the participation.
Yes.
And I'd like to thank everyone. And Colleen, if they have any questions, can you put your contact information
I
up one more time?
absolutely will. Yes, please email me directly or call me. I'm happy to talk with anybody about these details. There's so much to know with this project. So I want to make sure everyone's questions are answered. So let me make sure I typed it right before I send that. Would have a typo. Okay, I think you should be good. That's my email and that's my direct line. Please feel free to call me and I'll get in touch with you. Thank you.